All right, let's start with a story. Picture this. A big company just like yours deploys a shiny new internal AI assistant. Everybody is pumped. This thing is going to change the game, right? Productivity through the roof. And then just 3 weeks after launch, it happens. See this assistant? It's hooked into everything. We're talking SharePoint, all the HR docs, those super secret strategy folders, and of course, it's all over Slack. So one morning, it does exactly what it was built to do. It drops this perfectly written, super confident summary into a company-wide channel. The only problem buried in that perfect summary were details of a highly confidential merger that almost nobody was supposed to know about. And here's the absolute kicker. Nothing was hacked. There was no breach, no intrusion, not a single firewall failed. All the traditional security alarms silent. The security playbook was basically useless. So what on earth just happened? Well, the problem wasn't a break-in, it was propagation. The blast radius of one small internal error just expanded instantly across the entire organization. And that difference between a breach and propagation, it's not just semantics, it's an architectural problem. And it's the absolute key to understanding how we need to secure AI. I'm Giulio, and I spend my days working right at the intersection of AI security and enterprise architecture. In this video, we're going to get real about how to design AI systems so their blast radius is actually constrained by their architecture. We're going to look at this new kind of failure, figure out the right question we all need to be asking, walk through 5 critical control domains, see how it all works in practice, and then lay out exactly what you can do next. So why is this even a problem? Well, for decades, all of our enterprise security models have been built on a few core beliefs about software. First, that it behaves predictably. Second, that its boundaries are stable. And finally, that you know where it's going. But AI systems, they just shatter all of those assumptions. Their behavior is probabilistic, not deterministic. Their context is always changing, and their knowledge is fluid. So the old rule book just doesn't apply anymore. And that means that the old security question we used to ask about if the specific layer is secure is just not enough anymore. Now, this question has become too static. The new question, the one that really matters, is this. If the AI messes up right here, how far does that impact actually travel? That, my friends, is a blast radius question, and it's the right one to be asking. So how do we even measure this thing? Well, the blast radius is proportional to 3 things multiplied together. These are the capability, autonomy, and access. The smarter the model, the more freedom you give it. And the more stuff you let it connect to, the bigger your blast radius gets. So here's the key takeaway. Security in the modern AI context is not about getting rid of capability. Rather, it's about deliberately and architecturally putting limits on its autonomy and access. This isn't just some fuzzy philosophy. Rather, it's about basically architectural physics. So how do we wrap our heads around this? Well, instead of thinking in layers, I want you to start thinking in what I call control domains. There are 5 of them: cognitive, knowledge, action, system, and organizational. As we walk through these, I want you to always keep one question in your mind. And that is, at what point does a simple little error turn into a really big consequence? Let's start at the core. First up, we have the cognitive domain. This is all about what the model is allowed to think and what it's allowed to generate. The big risk here is what we call unbounded reasoning. See, when an AI's logic isn't constrained, it can spit out these answers that look incredibly authoritative. And before you know it, people are treating its output like it's a vetted final decision. This is where we see things go wrong with prompt injection, hallucinated authority, and unsafe synthesis of information. This brings up two absolutely critical questions. For the engineers in the room, the question is, what enforces the reasoning boundaries? Not what you hope the model does, but what piece of tech is actually enforcing it. And for the executives, if this AI gets it wrong, what downstream business decisions does that influence? And here's a little hot take for you. Model alignment is not a security control. It's a property of the model. Real controls are external. You can enforce them and you can audit them. Without them, a cognitive error very quickly becomes an enterprise level impact. Now, let's move on to the next domain, the knowledge domain. This domain governs what the AI is allowed to know, and maybe more importantly, what it's allowed to surface. The risk here is unauthorized knowledge propagation, and this one is really subtle. You need to understand that large language models don't just retrieve information, they synthesize it. They can pull together little fragments from a dozen different documents and weave them into a coherent summary that exposes an insight that no single document ever contained on its own. So the engineering question becomes, is your access control at the moment of retrieval really the same as the user's actual permissions? Because let me tell you, it's often not. And for the executive, the question is, could this system accidentally surface regulated or strategic secrets? Real controls here look like attribute-based access control and segmented vector stores. Without them, data access leads to synthesis, and synthesis becomes leakage. And again, no breach required, just simple propagation. Next is the domain where the blast radius really truly accelerates action. This domain governs what the AI is allowed to do. The moment a system goes from suggesting an action to when it actually executing it, the consequences multiply. The risk here is autonomous privilege amplification. And this is where we see failures like unrestricted API calls, giving tools way too many permissions, and the most dangerous of all, irreversible automation. The engineering question here is pretty stark. What irreversible actions can this system kick off all by itself? And for executives, what kind of financial, legal, or reputational damage could this automation amplify? Look, this is all about a trade-off. If you lock down the action domain too much, you lose all the value of automation. But if you don't constrain it enough, you create massive systemic risk. Security maturity is really the discipline of tuning that boundary on purpose. From there, we zoom out to the system domain. This is about what the AI service can reach across your entire infrastructure. We're talking identities, networks, secrets, API, the whole shebang. The risk here is an infrastructure pivot. Artificial intelligence systems often become these new superhighways for lateral movement inside your network, not because they're malicious, but just because they sit at this perfect intersection of high capabilities and broad access. This leads to some really critical questions for the engineers. What systems, API, and data does this AI implicitly trust? And for the executives, if this system gets compromised, what else falls down with it? The answers to these questions point you right back to classic security controls that are now more important than ever, such as least privilege, network segmentation, and good old-fashioned runtime monitoring. Finally, we get to the organizational domain. This is often the least technical one, but honestly, it's the most decisive. It governs who owns the blast radius. The great enterprise risk here is an accountability vacuum, and we see this all the time with shadow IT deployments, systems with no clear owner, and a total lack of formal risk classification. So the engineering question is painfully simple. Who is actually responsible for reducing the blast radius? Because if the answer is everyone, then the real answer is no one. And for executives, the question is a real gut check. Is your AI risk being actively measured, or is it just being assumed away? If nobody owns the blast radius, it will expand by default. You have to remember, technology does not govern itself. Organizations must do it. So, how do you put all this together? Well, we can use a simple maturity model. Most companies, and maybe you too, start at level 1 ad hoc. Here you are just experimenting. Then something goes wrong and you realize that you should move to the next level up. At level 2, you are reactive, basically patching and mitigating things after the fact. Level 3, on the other hand, is structured. Here you at least have controls documented and you have better control. Level 4 is integrated. Here those controls are part of your development lifecycle. Last level is the 5, and that is the place you want to be. At level 5, you are architecturally constrained. Here the blast radius is evaluated before you ever deploy, and those boundaries are set by designs. Okay, so what can you do right now? If you're an engineer, it's pretty straightforward. You can start by mapping your system across these 5 domains. Find the single most dangerous, irreversible action it can take, and focus all your effort on constraining that action domain first. That's your biggest leverage point guaranteed. If you're a security leader, your job is to make these operational. Start adding blast radius scoring to your architecture review boards. For every new AI project, score it from 1 to 5 across each of these 5 domains. Suddenly, you have a real metric you can use to track your maturity over time. And if you're an executive, your job is to drive accountability. You can do it with one critical question that you ask in every single AI review. What is the blast radius? If this system is wrong, if your team can't give you a clear, confident answer, then you are, by definition, operating at level 2. At level 2, you're just waiting for something bad to happen. You need to invest and ensure you are able to mature to a level 3 at minimum. The goal, as I said already, is to get to level 5. So let's close this video and let's do it by going back where we began with the core idea of this whole framework. AI systems don't really introduce brand new risks. They are amplifiers. They take existing risks and they expand the blast radius across all of these control domains. Real security maturity is the organizational and architectural discipline of constraining that expansion on purpose by design. This isn't about stopping AI. It's about building it the right way, responsibly. To conclude, I'm going to leave you with the one question that you need to take back to your teams. Start by look at the most important AI system you're building right now and ask this question. What is the blast radius if this system is wrong? Thank you so much for the time. I hope you have enjoyed this first video and you have learned about the blast radius framework. Stay tuned for the next set of videos where we will go deep into each of the components of the framework. Until then, stay secure.